Men, for example, if a man is emotional, they often feel like they need to fix that. If a man is sensitive, they often feel like they need to harden and be a man. So they live their lives at war with themselves, trying to fix this part of them away. With women, what I see is like if a woman's too bold, too much, or too achievement oriented, they're taught that they should soften and their hormones are out of whack and that they need to fix that away. To consider that the emotions that you think are good actually are neutral, and the emotions you think are bad actually are neutral, and they're all equal in value. I think people are afraid of what they don't understand. People are afraid of feeling uncertainty. People are afraid of doubt. People are afraid of fear. And people are also afraid of anything that reminds them of what they're afraid of that they're unwilling to look at. So you might as well heal in response to you moving forward rather than trying to dig up all these traumas and wounds that need to heal before you then live.
Welcome back to Soul Center Wellness, a place where I support you, or where we support you in your holistic lifestyle, where mind, body, and spirit work together for that desirable and mindful change. So today we have Carlos de la Playa. He's a life coach. He also has a podcast called Mischief and Mystery. If you guys haven't heard that, I will leave the link down below so you guys can hear it. He also calls himself Prince of Paradox, which is something we're going to talk a little bit about because it's very paradoxical. But the first question I have for you, Carlos, is who is Carlos? Who is Carlos? What planet Earth did he come from? And why did you decide to become a life coach?
That's such a good question, and there's like the part of me that wants to answer it in like that corporate, like, this is my brand, I help people do this. But I'm kind of like exploring like how I can answer that question without that a little bit, you know? My name's Carlos. I've been like, I use like the term life coach for lack of better term. I help people. I help people become to cultivate a relationship with themselves that feels more like home. I often say like a heaven on earth relationship to yourself, or a relationship to yourself that represents a lot of self-devotion. I'm like extremely passionate about emotions. I'm extremely passionate about helping people understand the psyche. I also use astrology a lot as a tool. And for those of you who resonate with astrology, I'm going through a period called the Saturn return, where it's very much a season of unbecoming who I thought I was in order to make space for like a true version of me. Like I say things like letting go of the almost you to become the truer you. And like that space in between, that void is kind of where I'm at right now. That unbecoming and like being okay with it. So, yeah, my name's Carlos. Super passionate about emotional freedom, emotional wellness, shadow work. And like my approach when it comes to like life coaching and working with clients is to really help them take a look at the things that we put under the rug, that we sweep under the rug, or the parts of ourselves that we don't like, the places where we have tension in our internal world, and learning how to ease that tension and let go of the need to like be at war with ourselves. So I'll leave it at that.
In your blog, you talked about forgiveness, especially self forgiveness. You encourage everyone not to be hard on themselves and look for positive outcomes in negative situations. Now, is this coming from your personal experience?
Definitely. I would say that my personal experience has been one of maybe a little bit more tension than the average person in America. And I feel like a lot of people have that same thought. But for context, I'm a gay man, and I've always been a very mystical person, even as a child. Also scientific, but I've always like really valued mysticism and mystery and things that can't really be measured by science. And I've always been, as a man, extremely emotional. Like crying during like if a butterfly fell on a flower in a movie in a poetic way, I would cry. So and So growing up, I was very familiar with tension because just me in my most natural state was a form of almost like rebellion, right? Like me, being artistic in a world that values more like capitalistic, sort of money-oriented, achievement-oriented goals, being very spiritual in a world that sees spiritual as less than empirical and scientific, or being gay in a country that it is kind of created by Christianity, right? And not that Christianity's bad. I actually also love Jesus. I just think that what the church has become is that's a whole nother topic. is is like opposite of who Jesus was as a person. So yeah, like I think that's a big reason why you'll see like on my blog or on my podcast, like I love talking about topics of self-forgiveness or holding space for fear or owning jealousy or owning our shadow and having a relationship with our shadow. And I find that some of the like coolest people in the world. And by cool, I don't mean like popular kid cool. I mean like people that are like their presence in this world is like giving and in service to humanity are people that have a relationship with the parts of themselves that they're taught to fix.
Mm-hmm.
And to learn how to recognize that maybe that thing that we're trying so hard to fix, like men, for example, often feel like if a man is emotional, they often feel like they need to fix that. If a man is sensitive, they often feel like they need to harden and be a man, right? Like whatever that even means. And so they live their lives at war with themselves, trying to fix this part of them away. With women, what I see is like, if a woman's too bold, too much, or too achievement oriented, they're taught that they should soften and that their hormones are out of whack and that they need to fix that away. Gay people are taught to dim their self-expression to as to not ruffle the feathers of people's discomforts. And I have so much experience with that in my own life that my biggest like passion or gift right now, at least in this season of my life, is to help people recognize where they're operating from those sort of shame programs, like something's wrong with them, and learning how to repattern that relationship to themselves so that they can like see the gift in it and increase their capacity to like live and to give to the world and be of service.
Mm. You know, I think Jordan Peterson talks about this where what we leave on the side or what we don't want to see are the things that we actually must look at. And that can possibly be our life's mission. The parts of you that you shamed and you blamed, is that why you're moving towards that direction, helping people liberate themselves?
I feel like I've always had this natural inclination towards emotions and towards intensity. Like things that would kind of scare people away, I was like also scared, but instead of being scared away, I was like curious. And I would kind of lean in more. I don't want people to think that that's always been the case. Like I'm still human. I still have parts of me that I'm at war with myself. And that's what makes me like more qualified to do this work is that I'm also walking this path. I feel like there's certain people in this world that like one of their gifts is to look at intensity, to look at the places within that are just crunchy and challenging and to almost in that bravery be forged into something that's like more pure. And I don't mean pure as in like puritanical. I mean pure as in like a truer you, like more connected to, your essence, like who you are, like the medicine that's in your bones, in your DNA. And I think that as kids, we like come into it so naturally. But as kids, our dominant priority isn't self-expression. It isn't living your purpose. As kids, our priority is like surviving and like being loved. What happens with children that I'm sure you know is, but maybe the listener doesn't know is like there's a certain point where our shine meets the standards of socialization and the rules and the limitations of other people's minds projected onto that child. And because the child most wants validation and love and to feel safe and held, that child will then perceive from that moment forward that this quality of them, that intensity, or this part of them that's more artistic, or this part of them that actually doesn't want to work a corporate job, or this part of them that cries or wants to paint their nails if they're a man, whatever. Like this, they learn that that part needs to be shoved into the basement of their psyche, and almost like, well, it's in the basement, it doesn't exist anymore. But because it's a part of who they are, that would be like if you jammed your, like if I slammed the door on my finger and just pretended I didn't have a finger and like kept trying to live, but my door is like stuck, like jammed between, the door handle or whatever. Like that's a painful experience. So people start to like live their life operating from this like fragmented, like really tense place, like people start to walk around and there's this vibe of like being spiritually constipated or something's always missing, or there's this undertone of anxiety. Yeah. I don't remember where I was going with that, so I'll let you take it from
Hey,
here.
hey, go with the flow, man. Go with the flow.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm listening, man. What comes up for me is the victim mentality. Do you think that when we are in that state of victim mentality, we continue that path throughout our lives as we grow? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think the idea of victim mentality has a lot of nuance depending on how it's defined.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I call myself the Prince of Paradox for a reason. I have this belief, and again, filter this belief through your own genius. I'm not here to create a fucking cult. I'm here to help people like think for themselves, whatever that looks like, and to trust themselves more. But I believe human beings are inherently paradoxical. So that means that two aspects of our personality can exist together in the same time and want completely different things and oppose each other. That's a paradox. Or another way that I look at paradox is like I actually, and in the context of victim mentality, is I actually believe that, and a lot of life coaches and people in the self-help spaces will disagree with me, and I'm okay with that. I think that the more we can accept the part of ourselves that actually was victimized, the more we actually gain power. I believe the more we learn to accept the part of us that feels and believes that we're powerless, and to actually hold space for that, and to love on that, and to shower that part of ourselves with approval, and actually own that what we went through was fucked up, whatever it might have been, it actually gives us power in our nervous system to soften around that tension and let go of the chemicals that have been stuck in our body since that horrible thing happened, you know? So and on the other side of that, I do believe that a lot of people will sort of use something bad happening to them or victim mentality as a way to sort of manipulate people into seeing their way, which that to me is not acceptance. That's not true power. That's like you're trying to avoid something by getting other people to think a certain way about your traumas and stuff. So I think there's a grace and a bravery to like if fucked up shit happened to you growing up, or if you are someone that experiences more oppression based off of the color of your skin or your sexuality or your gender, there's a power in owning, because then once you own like what's right in front of you and you own where you were wronged or where you felt trauma, it actually gives you the capacity to hold space for it and to create a solution and to find creativity.
Hmm. For the audience that don't know about Carlos and I, we are soul brothers. I'm just kidding. No, no, but we met at a place called the Grounding Camp that was held by a man called Elliot Hulse. One of the things that I don't think we ever discussed this, Carlos, but I don't think you came out of the closet when we talked. And maybe you did. Maybe you told me you were bi. When did you come out? Were you shaming and blaming that part of you in those instances?
Yeah, so uh that's a great question. When I met you at that retreat, I was definitely still in the closet. But I was
Okay.
starting to tell people that I was bi-curious, which
Mm,
wasn't true. I was not curious about women at all.
mm, mm-hmm.
And I'd already had experiences, like intimate experiences with women, and I was just like, no, like this is not the vibes. But I kept, I got so clever in my mind that I managed to really believe that I was like bi or bi curious, even though I wasn't. So when you met me, uh, to answer your question, no. And I came out, I had went to a series of other like retreats after that, and I came out in this retreat in Hawaii. We were doing this confession exercise where you like ruin your reputation on purpose in front of everybody. And God, this story, I've told it so many times, and every time I tell it, it still brings up like charge. But um, we were doing this confession exercise, and it was my third time doing this exercise with the same retreat company. It was my third retreat with them. I said the same thing. I was like, "Oh, I've been with guys before. I'm kind of confused about my sexuality." And I said it for the third time in a row. And like one of my mentors in that retreat company like came up to me during like lunch later, and he started asking me very gentle questions that made me realize that I was lying to myself. And when it hit me, I decided that before the next exercise would start at the retreat, I would like interrupt the facilitator, jump into the middle of the circle and like come out. And that's exactly what I did. And like the facilitator was, starting to give instruction, and I was like, "Wait, stop! I have something to say." And I kind of like fell to my knees in the middle, and it felt like this weight was lifted, but I also felt so like raw and exposed and embarrassed. And I also at the same time felt this surge of power. What it felt like is like I was like turning into a lion. Like if I could conceptualize feeling that, that's what it felt like. And that was like one of my first experiences of like the power of like paradox is like I had this moment of falling to my knees, exposing my weakest points, and that like completely skyrocketed my sense of power and my sense of confidence. And then after that, I started noticing other areas where, because I feel like the experience of coming out of the closet is something everyone goes through, regardless of your sexuality. For some people, it's about like learning to come out of the closet, about setting boundaries and actually like standing up for themselves. Or for some people, for like men, it's like owning their emotions if they're emotional. I'm strictly speaking about my own experience that I've had with my own clients, or people starting to own their power, or maybe an artist being like, actually I don't want to fucking work a 9 to 5, I want to start my art business or whatever, or actually I don't want the American dream, I want to like move to Mexico in the mountains, right? Like, so I feel like everyone has this experience a few times in their life of like coming out of the closet, and up until that point I felt like I was like taking up space and taking risks and trying new things, but the one thing that was like a ball and chain was the shame around my sexuality, because I was raised Catholic and I grew up a mystic, so I was very, very devoted to Catholicism. I was like the best student in that world, and I was constantly getting rewards and prizes from my teachers. And I'll never forget what my CCD teacher, and CCD, for those of you who don't know, is like a Catholic class that like prepares you for your first communion, which is like a sacrament that happens in Catholicism. And he started talking about like gay being a sin. And I remember I was in middle school and I just stood up and I was like, that's bullshit. Like, Jesus loved everyone. Jesus didn't taught that. The Bible was written by man, and I just like fought him in front of everyone. And in that moment, I became like very jaded towards Christianity for a long time. And and a part of me still wanted to be loved by like Christian people. So I was in the closet until like age 24.
Oh.
And that mask started to feel more uncomfortable
Hmm.
and more uncomfortable. And there's a point where it's like enough is enough. And like the part of you that served you as a child needs to die in order for like new life to be generated in like the soil or garden of your psyche. For me, like I wanted to grow past that point, and holding on to that mask was like putting a cap on my growth. And I wanted to like burst out of that and like have a new sort of baseline to or outer edge to grow into. I find that this process never really goes away, you know, like our culture, I believe this, you know, filter this through your own genius, but I do believe that our culture in the modern world is designed to kind of make you feel stuck or overwhelmed or like chronically distracted or like not growing past a certain point. There's this sort of metaphorical death and rebirth that happens when you like push past like a limit once and for all. But in order to push past that limit, like you've gotta do shadow work and like recognize all the patterns that you've held on to because they helped you survive or be loved as a kid. And let go of that and be willing to not be liked so that you can actually feel more of a sense of internal love, purpose, you know?
Yeah, there's a philosophy when it comes to not caring what people think of you. We can intellectually hear that, try our best to be ourselves, but why do you think people can't do that? Why can't they, like, they hear it, they understand it, but can't really implement it?
I think the human mind is so clever that it has a way of like protecting us from expanding or growing by creating by taking a teaching like that, like you shouldn't care what people think, and using it as a weapon against themselves, right? So I think people that are really afraid to take up space, but they're thinking about it. They're like, you know what? I want to like come out of the closet in this area of my life. I want to stand up for myself more. I want to speak up more. They'll hear a teaching like that. And if they're in like a shadowy state or a lower energy state, like the part of their mind that's associated with comfort is going to take that and be like, oh, you actually care what people think, therefore you can't take up space. Like, you've got to heal this first. You've got to like heal the trauma around caring what people think. And that is a huge trap. You know, that I need to heal this trauma before I can live trap. I need to hit this goal before I can be happy trap. I need to heal my anxious attachment before I find my soulmate trap. Like, you name it. It's a way that our mind has hijacked our wisdom and very cleverly framed something with a good intention that's actually keeping you stuck. And I think people will, again, going back to paradox, like if it's true, like there's a liberation that comes from like not caring what people think. Part of arriving to that point where you actually don't care what people think is actually meeting yourself where you're at and recognizing that you do care what people think. And being like, you know what? I own this. I care what people think, and I'm going to practice expanding my capacity to not care what people think. That's so much more fucking powerful than pretending you don't care what people think, but secretly you care what people think because you don't want to own that. And that happens all the time with people like on a healing path. And it still happens to me. I don't want people to look at me and think like I've arrived somewhere because I fucking haven't. And I would be very skeptical of any like spiritual teacher, mentor, or life coach that only shows the positive and only shows their highlights, because that is a form of manipulation in my opinion. But that's besides the point. When you can take a teaching like that and have grace with yourself and own it. Like, bravely be like, you know what? I actually do give a shit what people think. Like, listener, if you're listening right now and you care what people think, I like SpongeBob in that episode where he's like, I'm ugly and I'm proud. Like, I want you to do that with like caring what people think. Say, actually, I give a shit what people think because I'm fucking human and in my DNA, there's genetics that protected me from being exiled from the tribe, which would have killed me. Therefore, I care about humans. Like, this part of me was actually useful in more tribal times that weren't so interconnected now. Like, if you didn't care what people think, you would literally die. Whereas now that's much less the case. But we still have that pattern within our nervous system. Part of transformation is ownership, though. It's like when someone has an addiction, and again, that's another word I'm careful with because I think people throw addiction around a lot and they're not addicted. They're really just like, anyways, a whole other topic. Like when someone that has an addiction is like, you know what? I actually have an addiction to this thing. I own that. Now they can create change. That's the power of paradox. It's like we think that because we have this thing, we think that because we care what people think, we can't express ourselves. But that's not true. It's actually, we could learn to navigate that energy and that tension in a way that expands our capacity, expands our aliveness, expands our creativity, rather than constricts us. If we look to the hero's journey, I'm a huge fan of anime, Japanese anime, because it's so good at talking about this dynamic. It's like if you have a calling towards something, inside the hero's journey, there's literal like boss battles they face, enemies they face that are constantly getting in their way. The hero isn't all confident all the time. Sometimes they're in the pits of despair. Sometimes they're terrified. Sometimes they recognize they lose a battle and they recognize they're weak and they need to get stronger and then they go back to it. Those heroes, we can look to that to teach us because those heroes they act in spite of their limitations and their limitations prompt the next step instead of trying to get rid of all limitations before they take any step. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not gonna watch an anime if there's not a little bit of tension, a little bit of tea, a little bit of drama, you know? When we start to approach our limitations with more grace and more love, and just see it as like I have this limitation. This is a space for me to get to know myself better. This is a space for me to cultivate a deeper intimacy with myself. It's not something I need to fucking fix because you're not a robot. You're not a machine that needs fixing. God didn't fuck up making you. I believe that at least, right? Like, how can we use that limitation to actually be a stepping stone towards our truest you, whatever that means, rather than how can we trust that sometimes too? And that brings me to a whole nother topic, which is like sometimes our limitations are actually like supposed to be there. And they're there, like there's certain times where when we're constantly met with limitation in life, that might actually be because that thing we're going after isn't what we really want. It's what we've been programmed to want. So we meet limitation after limitation after limitation as a way of our body, our spirit, the wisdom in our bones, sort of being like, hey, bitch, like, maybe it's time for you to pivot. Maybe you don't actually want this career. Maybe you don't actually want to date this person that you convinced yourself is your soulmate. Maybe you don't actually, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, man. Going back to the whole paradoxical thing, well, I actually adopted this, but I used to be super positive over everything. And what I think is I adopted this in the spiritual community. My question is, why do you think we seek this?
That is such a good question. And I just want to super mega validate that. Like, it's so normal and it's so human to want to be positive. Like, me too, homie. Like, samesies. And our society has, growing up, we've been taught that certain emotions are bad to feel. And then we've also been taught that certain emotions are good to feel. One thing that I've that really supports me through this, and I really encourage you, the listener, to only take what resonates and leave the rest behind. Like, to consider that what the emotions that you think are good actually are neutral, and the emotions you think are bad actually are neutral, and they're all equal in value. And I think people are afraid of what they don't understand. People are afraid of feeling uncertainty. People are afraid of doubt. People are afraid of fear. People are also afraid of anything that reminds them of what they're afraid of that they're unwilling to look at. So, if in spiritual communities, which have their pros and cons, a lot of people that are going into these spaces are going into it not realizing that they're afraid of like themselves. They're afraid of their own fear. They're afraid of their own darkness. So when somebody has the bravery to own their shadow, they're like, just be positive. Stop being such a victim. Get out of your victim mentality. When people come at me with that energy, or when I see someone like being like, stop being such a fucking victim, like, and they're almost like defensive or like trying to attack somebody that's in a dark night of the soul, or in and dark night of the soul just means like a season of shadow and going inward, right? And a challenge. But what that tells me is those people are like really afraid of that part of themselves that also is that. Positivity has a beautiful intention, but I think a lot of people need to recognize that intention doesn't always equal impact. And sometimes, like, you can have the intention of trying to do good to others or to yourself, and you actually create harm in yourself and in others. And that does not mean, I want to give a mega nuance here, because that does not mean you should ever avoid doing harm. Just by existing, you're harming something. So I'm not saying don't ever harm. I'm saying like, can you own when you're actually harming yourself? Can you own when you're harming somebody else? And can you use that as a way to have a conversation with yourself, feel safer in your own body, and learn from it? Because it's not about not ever making a mistake. It's about like, okay, like this mistake happened, like can I navigate it better? And I think sometimes in spiritual spaces, there's this avoidance of the shadow, like, a lot of people wanting to like breath work away their feelings and take and do 20,000 mushroom and ayahuasca ceremonies. And these things are tools, they're valuable. But like, at what point does the medicine become another crutch where you're like avoiding just owning that you want to fall to your knees and shake your fist angry at God? And then once you finally arrive to that point, then you actually start creating. It's weird. It's paradoxical. I don't know why it's that way, but it seems to be.
You know what has helped me become as authentic as I can be. I was able to communicate with people the way I want to communicate with them, and doing my best to accept the parts of me that I've been hiding away. In my experience, learning how to be who I am, it was through holistic psychology.
Hmm.
And you know, in holistic psychology, there's shadow work, there's inner work involved. And so, my question is, did you find the same experience? Or was it like maybe a ceremony, a ayahuasca ceremony?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I that makes a lot of sense. So, my I when I went to college, and look, I think college is a scam, but I made the best of it. I graduated with a bachelor's in psychology and a minor in the study of spirituality. And you know, I have a favorite psychologist. I'm very nerdy about psychology. Like Carl Jung is my favorite. Like I'm obsessed with that man. Like if I could somehow just interview him on my podcast, that would be amazing. But he's not alive, so maybe I can use AI. No, I'm kidding. But I feel like one thing I love about Carl Jung is he's a disruptor, meaning that he like his very thoughts and ideas were the complete antithesis to like what modern science at the time like believed in. He brought in metaphysics into spirituality. He brought in the shadow, as you mentioned. And yeah, his teachings helped me a lot. They really did. Because he helped me start to see that I could have an awareness of the dynamics inside of me as like archetypal, almost as like different voices inside of me. Like, there's the part of me that's the inner saboteur or the inner critic. There's the part of me that's like very sensual and erotic. There's the part of me that's a mystic. There's a part of me that's into data and very nerdy. There's the athlete, like, and it kind of taught me that I could engage with these different parts of me and almost have a conversation with them to like, as if like I'm the manager of the CEO of the company of me, or like the king of the kingdom of Carlos. So, and I'm listening to the different parts of me. And I'm like, what do you need to be fed? Oh, is the tyrant taking control again? Okay, let me put him down, and now the peacekeeper is going to take control. You know, like, oh, the mystic doesn't feel like he's been fed in months. Let me feed him, you know?
Mhm.
Like, but then the other part's being angry about that because they want to take control. And learning how to navigate that, like, I feel like Jung's frameworks and stuff have really supported in that for sure.
Do you have
Um,
a Final Fantasy character in there?
oh my God. Dude, my high self is a Final Fantasy character,
Uh-huh.
so for those of you who don't know, I often say that my spirit guides are the main characters of Final Fantasy, which is a video game series that's remarkable. It's literal fucking art that I've been playing since I was a kid. And yeah, there's definitely, honestly, people are like, Carlos, what's your life purpose? And I'm like, I just want to be a living, breathing Final Fantasy character. Like, so.
Is that why you have a deep connection because you find some meaning in the character?
Final Fantasy was an expression. So there's like a lot of different Final Fantasy games, and a lot of people think that it's like a sequel because there's like I think right now there's 16. And it's Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, up to 16. Each number is like a completely different story with different characters. And my first ever Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy X. And the themes around it were about mysticism, government corruption, how the church mind controls people. It was a story that was very adjacent to what I felt but couldn't put into words as a kid. And the characters kind of, and there's actually this book that someone wrote that's a little bit boring. I almost wish that I wrote the book. No, I'm kidding. But it's called The Psychology of Final Fantasy. Damn, I probably shouldn't have said that on this public podcast, but it's
we can
fine. No,
we, if I
no,
can edit it if you want me to.
no, you don't have to edit it. I'm gonna own it. I'm gonna own it. But like,
Yeah.
I think the Final Fantasy characters all represent like it's not that you are one character, but it's that you are each of the characters is a different part of you. The characters were framed as like evil by society, which this happens to me all the time. I've lost so many friends because they had like a Christian reawakening, whatever the fuck that means, and they suddenly saw me as like the epitome of Satan. But like obviously like I'm helping people. You know what I mean? Like come on, you know? So, and this is the same thing that happened to the characters in the video game. Like, they were just trying to show people that freedom was accessible and that you can choose your own path and to question the systems of oppression that are trying to mind control you into just blindly following everything that they do and being obedient, you know? It ended up being like throughout the story of Final Fantasy X, which is a very mystical, magical, enchanting story, lots of metaphors of mysticism as well, and ritual and intention. But the main characters ended up realizing that this system to like save the world was broken. And they were the first ones to challenge the system. The system tried to take them down, but they ended up winning and completely changing the world. So I think in a lot of ways, as a kid, playing Final Fantasy was a way for me to process this pain that I didn't know how to hold at the time. I didn't understand, and at the time I was even angry at God about this. How could you create me as I am, and then me as I am is just wrong to the world? Like that just makes no fucking sense. That's poor design. Uh, and I've lost a lot of friends that are in similar spaces where we've met that like they were my best friends and out of nowhere they're like, "Oh, you're gay, like that means the devil moves through you." I'm like, "What?" If you're low key in the closet, just say that. If you have a crush on me, just say that. No, that's me being That's me being petty, but like, yeah, and that was very painful. Still is. And at the same time, it's like because I'm saying yes to the pain, saying yes to that aliveness and allowing my body to hold it, it's actually helping me help other people and be of service to the world.
I think I know who you're talking about.
There's many people in our
Okay.
same, yeah.
Okay.
There's like a whole squad that I'm like, damn, y'all
Wow.
really did that.
Wow. Yeah, and we for the audience, it was like a group of men um learning to become men in spirituality. For me, I accept everyone, man. I accept everyone for who they are, and I try my best to see my judgments because the judgments are still going to be there. And maybe that's me, conditioned as a little child. Going back to the Final Fantasy characters, I also grew up with games. And I didn't even finish Final Fantasy. It was too hard for me to finish it. It was too hard. But what I remember is that I had a lot of imagination as a little kid. Do you think imagination can help with our inner development or shadow work?
Abso-freaking-lutely. Oh, I love this question. Part of like my framework is pay attention to your obsessions or where your imagination takes you to like reveal your life's main quest. And I'm very deeply fascinated by the unconscious mind. And there's the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And the conscious mind is more like what we think of consciously, what we like, oh, there's this goal, here's how I'm gonna hit that goal, like our conscious thoughts that we hear. The unconscious mind is more subtle. She's more mystical. She's more like when you go into a light trance and you get a sudden idea out of nowhere, that's the unconscious mind. Dreams, that's the unconscious mind. Emotion is usually the unconscious mind, right? There's more nuance to that. They can dip into both. But video games that you're obsessed with, stories that you're obsessed with, colors, symbols, landscapes, textures, characters that for some reason just draw you in are often revealing to you an aspect of you that you wish you would own more and that you have put in the basement of your psyche and it's like calling you back home. Oh God, I just got the chills saying
Yeah.
that because it's like right now I have this obsession with the show One Piece, which is one of the most famous Japanese animes of all time. Like it's insane the amount of people that watch this. And it's because One Piece was revealing to me like an aspect of myself that I was not living that I just so badly wanted and still want. I'm actually working on that aspect right now. Final Fantasy was that for me as well, and still is. So a question that I've often, a lot of things that I do with my clients too, and with myself, is I take them into a state of like light trance. And when people hear the word trance or hypnosis, they think like eyes rolling back and you're shaking and the spirits are leaving your body. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Like when you drive and you're kind of lost in thought, that's a state of trance. When you're like zoned out on TV, that's a state of trance. When you're scrolling on your phone, that's a state of trance, right? It's a light meditative state. That's all it is. But in that meditative state, the gatekeeper that's blocking you from hearing your subconscious mind like goes to sleep, which allows you to be more in tune with the imagery in your mind, the feelings in your body, and the inklings, the curiosity, the subtleties, the energies, right? Where you're being pulled. So sometimes like I'll guide people into a state of trance, and because I'm a fucking poet, like I call it the void instead of a state of trance because it just sounds cooler. But so I take people into this void and I literally will tell them, look at the black behind your eyelids with your eyes closed and just pretend that it's a movie screen that's about to turn on. Or listen to the farthest sound you can hear as if you're waiting for somebody to talk. Oftentimes, in that state of trance, like what you need will just come through. It might be that you need to process an emotion that you've been avoiding. That'll just come up. And I've seen people just start crying in the void. I might ask them a question like, what are you just weirdly obsessed with in your life? And, if I'm giving myself as an example, One Piece, like images of One Piece or Final Fantasy will come out, right? Before I even knew that this was like my path and this was like work that I was gonna do in the world, when I was in like high school and college, I used to have unnatural obsessions with certain animals. And what I eventually realized is those were kind of like my spirit animals that were like giving me a guide to what I most needed in that moment. So my first one ever was a turtle, and I was obsessed. Like I had them as pets. Like it was just weird. And then suddenly, like I just see them as neutral. But turtle symbology came into my life when I really was just in such a rush and just needed to slow down. And I was driving myself miserable because of how in a rush I was. And then at one point that was the wolf. And the wolf taught me like it's okay to go inward and to like be away from your friends for a bit to discover yourself. And at the time I was leaving a toxic group of friends and I needed that bravery of the wolf to like be by myself. Even though wolf is a pack animal, but for some reason I think about it and it just that's the medicine it gives me. And then it became the lion when I was coming out of the closet. And I would even have dreams about lions attacking me. And then, like, I came out and those dreams stopped. I feel like the unconscious mind is where you really connect with your purpose. Like, a lot of people in the self-help and spiritual transformation worlds, they're only conscious. Like, say your affirmations, set your goals, and we need that too. But if that's the only thing taking the wheel, then you're going to find, and this happened to me, that you're going to create a life that you thought you wanted, and it ends up being like golden handcuffs, or you're miserable, or it feels very empty. But when you go into the world of the unconscious mind and you listen deeply, like the metaphor I give people is imagine that you could sense the space between the cells of your bones and listen to that as if you're waiting for someone to talk. Like, this is the level of listening that I invite people to have with themselves. Because when you listen to that, it's impossible for you to not know what your true desires are. It's impossible for you to not eventually know like where you're lying to yourself. But the thing is this part of you, your unconscious mind doesn't give a shit about socialization. It doesn't give a shit about what you're afraid of. It's going to tell you what you need. And a lot of people aren't ready for that conversation. I have this theory that the people that have like Christian reawaken. Okay, there's two types of Christians. I have a lot of Christian friends, by the way, that I'm very close to. I'm not talking about these people. I'm talking about the ones that like swing to this opposite and they become like hyper obsessed with like destroying evil, putting it in air quotes, like, or fighting Satanism, or uh like hating gay people. Like uh what my theory is that they were fucking with shit that they weren't ready for, and when they saw their shadows, they were so afraid that they ran to Jesus to try and save them from that shadow. And now they're projecting that onto the world as like anything that scares me is satanic. And I really think they're just projecting their own like darkness that they're afraid onto the world and trying to like fight this evil. Yeah.
Based off of your own experience.
Right, right. And I could be wrong. Granted, this is a wounded relationship I have with those people. But and I say those people and I hear that and I'm like, God, you see how I'm doing the same thing that they do?
Well,
But I'm
that's the
always
paradox, no?
exactly, you know? Yeah, and I don't want people to think that I've arrived at this place where I've ascended past my humanity. Like, nah, I'm there. I'm walking the path too, you know?
Well, I think you're really brave. Because in your blog you also posted the stuff you hate about, or I don't know about hate, maybe dislike
Yeah.
about yourself. and you showed your teeth, you showed your jaw, you showed your head. And what's funny about all this is that I'm looking at that and I'm like, that's not what comes up for me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Could you remind me like which one you're talking about?
It was in your earliest posts on
Yeah.
Instagram, but you just talked about like accepting and acceptance and forgiveness and whatnot. But
Yeah.
that's why I said that's true bravery. That's you being raw and sharing with people what you're embarrassed of.
Yeah. I also think like a lot of us like secretly crave that, you know? I could be wrong. I feel like people are kind of tired of like chasing pretty a standard of prettiness or handsome or attractive that's just like unreachable. Or uh in social media, right? Like most of us, myself included, like post our highlight reels because we want people to think of us a certain way. My intention with that is to kind of liberate myself from that a little bit while also like maybe this can help someone too. Like maybe someone out there is like, damn, you mean I can just own that I don't like my smile and not try to fix it at the same time? Or like, or maybe it's not even just physical appearance, but like aspects of the personality. One part of myself that recently I learned to love is the part of me that has a lot of like rage. I used to be terrified of that part of me, and now I've realized that rage, I can actually use rage to create the opposite of that thing that's like giving me rage. So if I am angry at the government, like I can use rage to create a circumstance in my life that feels more life-giving. That's the opposite of that, rather than like avoiding my rage, which was just not fun.
Yeah, and I think Nietzsche talked about that, if I'm not mistaken, transmuting that part of you like this. Like, for
Yeah.
instance, I also have this hate and love relationship with corporations, and I'm transmuting that into making this podcast, into sharing different belief systems and techniques, philosophies to open people's minds to live a holistic lifestyle. I can't really shake that off, that belief system that I have, that I'm using that fuel to do this. But is it serving me right now? It is. It's making shit happen.
I love that. I love what you just said because it goes back to like just meeting yourself where you're at. That's grace. That's like, okay, this is where I'm at. I'm creating from this angry place, but at least I'm using anger to create the opposite of what's making me angry instead of waiting for myself to feel blissed out and ascended from anger in order for me to finally create. And that's like the next step on the ladder or on the staircase. A question I like to ask myself too, like let's say there's a part of me I'm at war with myself with. Maybe it's bitterness, maybe I'm feeling bitter, maybe I'm feeling a lot of depression, anxiety, anger, rage. A question that I like to play with is given that this is here, and let's just pretend that it's never going to change. Let's pretend that the depression will always be there. And that doesn't mean it'll always be there, by the way. Disclaimer, that's just a thought experiment. But just try it out. This part of me that I've been dying to fix, depression, anger, rage, bitterness, let's pretend it's never going to go away. What would it look like for me to thrive even though this is here? Oh, I just got the chills, like, because the nervous system loves questions that move forward progress. But what a lot of people are doing is, well, let me cross my arms. I can't create my podcast until I feel confident, until I'm not angry anymore. And that is literally how fear wins. It's it's and that's self-betrayal because what that says is in order for me to receive love, then I need to be fucking perfect. And that's never gonna happen. Never. Hate to break it to you, but you're a human that shits, pisses, gets angry. You sometimes say shit you regret to your lover and then apologize later. Like, that's never gonna end no matter how much healing you do. So you might as well heal in response to you moving forward rather than trying to dig up all these traumas and wounds that need to heal before you then live, right? Like I think there's those two ways to do this work. It's like digging it up, waiting, 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 digging it up, waiting. And that's the thing. If you keep looking for shit to heal, you're gonna keep finding it. Or you could be like, you know what? I want to start this podcast. I'm terrified of being a people pleaser. I'm terrified of like interviewing someone and freezing. But you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna do it anyways. That's the hero's journey. That's the journey of the Final Fantasy character, the Japanese anime hero, right? It's like I'm gonna do it afraid. And then when that thing happens, it becomes an opportunity rather than something to be like, oh, I surrender, like I froze up on a podcast, therefore I can't be a podcaster or whatever it is for you, you know?
Yeah, I've witnessed this, beating myself in the head on the wall over and over and over again, and I'm like, nothing is happening. I'm still seeking to be perfect.
Yeah.
And it's like, how many times do you have to beat yourself on the wall to create your dream?
Yeah. And here's the thing, it works. You if you it works to create the result, right? Like you could crack a whip over yourself and get that six-figure income, baby, or grow to the 10,000 YouTube subscribers or have the abs, right? You can do that. It will work. But understand that if you are cracking the whip to fuel your forward progress, then you are also getting really strong and really good at becoming an expert at shame and anxiety and force. You're also going to the gym for self-betrayal. Let's say, and this happened to me, right? Like literally I reached my dream physique, body, whatever, but there was always another one and always another one. And then I ended up on crutches for like 6 months. If the quality of your fuel is self-loathing, you're getting better at self-loathing. It's okay for you to explore what it could be like to do it in a more accepting, a more generative, a more life-giving way, a more collaborative way. Like if you weren't trying to colonize your body, but you were actually dating your body and asking for consent, then what might reaching your goals feel like? And at that point, you're practicing, you're also going, like, let's say your goal is to like have abs. Nothing wrong with that. I love having abs, period. But like, let's say my goal is to like have a certain kind of like look in my body, whatever. I can, move through that process by asking my body for consent. Like, hey, do you even consent to doing a second workout in one day? My body will respond. It'll be like, no, bitch, like, go to sleep, drink some water, drink some electrolytes, and meditate. Like, let me recover. And then it's like, okay, body, I trust you, body. And then you go to your next workout and your capacity is stronger because you recovered. And then you also got stronger at self-love because you're working out with self-love. Or you can choose the path of shame and it like using force, but eventually it will create some sort of burnout or injury or it'll just be exhausting.
I can vouch for that. I
Yeah.
have tons of injuries.
Yeah, literally same. I tore my meniscus like bad like 2 months ago. I don't need surgery, thankfully, but
And what's the meaning behind that one?
I was trying to regain deep squat mobility. And because every health coach says that you have to have that in order to like be healthy, whatever, At least that's what I turned it into in my brain. And I did too much too fast too soon. I was in a deep squat and it just popped and like it was stuck and I was on crutches. And I was like, okay, noted. Like, no more. I'm moving. Now my goals are I'm moving my body to feel good. I'm moving my body to explore deeper intimacy with myself. I'm moving my body to feel more alive rather than like, I must get this deep squat because when I'm there, I'll be healthier.
Why are you seeking that?
I think it goes back to like that tendency for the human mind and myself included to achieve perfection or to like prove ourselves.
However, we are, like you said, we are perfect the way we are.
Right? And here's the thing, y'all. I'm in the trenches so that I can be better to the humans that like come to do work with me. So it's like in a weird way, and this is how I made meaning. When I tore my meniscus in my knee and I was on crutches again, how I treated myself throughout that healing process just showed how much I had my own back. And like I started noticing that when like my clients would get on the calls with me, like they would come to me with this shadow that they thought that would make me abandon them, and I'd be unfazed because I was already friends with that part of myself. That's what I love about people that like do shadow work is I find that even with you, like I sense that you're someone that does a lot of shadow work, right? Like people that do a lot of shadow work, at least in my opinion, like I feel safer around those people. Like I can drop the mask, I don't have to perform, I don't have to like show that I add value and all these things that are very strange to me.
So, what I find to be true for me, the reason for that is empathy. I know what it's like to feel that way. I know how it feels to have the shadows and to run away from them and then to cry, to get mad, to get sad. But with that being said, for the listeners, you also mentioned Tara Brach, the RAIN self compassion method.
Yeah,
Do you teach those steps for people to get connected with themselves?
absolutely. So Tara Brock, I call her mother. She is mother. I love her. Tara Brock was when I first started to really like make it a practice to decondition. This is her phrasing, decondition the tendency to be at war with yourself. And she teaches this method called the RAIN of self-compassion. RAIN is an acronym, RAIN. RAIN stands for recognize, A is allow and accept, I is investigate, and N is nurture. So anytime you feel at war with yourself, or maybe you had an argument that you can't stop thinking about, or you feel an emotion that you don't like to feel, you can use the RAIN of self-compassion. There's actually a free YouTube meditation that she has on her channel. There's a 10-minute version and a 20-minute version. If you just type in RAIN Tara Brach, and that's spelled Tarabrach. This is a free tool that you can use to decondition the tendency to be at war with yourself and to develop a better relationship to self. I love her. And yes, I went to life coaching school and I've had many mentors. Tara Brock is one of them. And I sort of like take the tools, use them as needed on myself and on clients. And I always tell people if something doesn't work, don't do it. You don't need to fix yourself into a tool. No, 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 no. You find the tool that fits you. It's the same thing with clothing, right? Like, you don't need to lose the weight to fit into that piece of clothes. Get rid of that piece of clothes and buy clothes that fits you. You don't need to fix yourself to fit your relationship or your friendships. Find the friendships that love, nurture, and accept you as you are and help you grow and prompt you to grow. Yeah. Would you mind if we take just like a quick break?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I just need to pee super bad.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Okay, okay. Go for it.
Hey, I'm back.
How was it?
Dude, it was liberating. It was liberating.
uh no, I was actually going to end it. But I was like, no, let him pee and then he can give us a good conclusion.
Okay.
But anyways, maybe that would be cool to leave it there.
No, it's okay. Look,
Uh
shadow work, baby. No,
shadow
I'm
work.
kidding.
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude, thanks for sharing all this to us, man, cuz we really need it. It's so easy to not see those parts of us. It's so easy to look at a phone screen and to distract ourselves. Let's be truthful and notice those areas that we don't want to see. But is there anything you want to leave the audience with? Is there something you want to maybe an opportunity to work with you?
I'll leave you with this. So, in saying this to you, I'm like also saying it to myself. But like, y'all, it's okay to like put the healing down for a little bit. Like it's okay to like put the breath work down for a little bit if you want to, right? Like I'm not saying breath work is bad. I use that as a metaphor, but like just enjoy the experience of being you as you are in this moment. As much as you can, you know, like even though maybe you have social anxiety or maybe you feel like you have a little bit of people pleasing tendencies or like there's still also a lot of magic to who you are in this moment and like you know, who you are right now, a past version of you prayed for. It's okay to connect with that from time to time. And not as a way to bypass discomfort. Like, you can connect with that and still feel angry at the state of the world. Like, it's not either or. It's okay to, like, not rush your healing. That felt important to say. And as far as, like, your question about, like, uh, getting involved in my world, I'm most active on my Substack blog, which is also an email newsletter of sorts. But uh, if you find me like on Instagram at Carlos de la Playa, in my link is like everything, right? So my podcast, my blog, you know, how you can work with me. I do one-on-one coaching. I also use astrology as one of the many tools to hypnosis coaching. I do offer like free conversations, that initial conversations. Yeah, the best way to get involved with my world is the podcast and the blog. That is free 99 and I do it in a way where it's like, okay, how can I really help people like choose differently today in a way that like is in service to them? That's it.
All right. We'll see everyone on the next. Thank you for coming, Carlos. I appreciate it. All right, guys. Yeah,
Thank
take care.
you.